Hey everyone, so I am back outside today and I am going to refresh the potting soil that I emptied out of all of my containers that I brought inside and get it ready to use this season. I might actually pot up a plant with you today as well. Again, not something I'd normally be doing this early in the season, but I'm starting to need to plant some things up that are staying outside. So I will link down the video below where I showed how I stored it. Basically I dumped all of the potting soil into a container. So that's pretty much the video, but I'll link it down in case you want some more information there. But today I'm going to refresh it, and I pretty much use two main things when I refresh soil, whether it's what I emptied into the container or whether it's when I refresh my raised beds. So I never completely replace the soil. The only time I will get rid of soil is if there was something diseased growing in it and I don't want that disease to spread through the soil. Luckily, that's never happened in a raised bed, but gardening on rooftop deck, there's really no place for the soil to go. I can carry it down, obviously that's how I discard any diseased soil, but there's no place for me to empty out excess soil other than our parkway. So the soil that comes up here stays up here forever, and it's worked for me since 2020 when I first started gardening here. I also confirmed it with one of my horticulture professors last year in the fall. I kind of went through my process and she said that sounds good. So the two main things that I use to refresh my soil: compost and perlite. The compost is to add nutrients, help balance out the soil. The perlite is because as time goes on, the particles in soil break down and get smaller, which makes drainage worse. So I add the perlite in to improve drainage. So those are the two things I'm going to add today. And then I also like to add in, usually when I'm actually planting some things like biotone, earthworm castings, anything else, bone meal, anything that's really good for plants, I'll add in when I'm actually planting into a pot. But for now, I'm going to get my tub refreshed so that I have it ready to go for all of the planting that I'm going to start doing. Underneath this raised bed, what will be my Gumfrina bed, is the tub of soil that I just left out here over winter. So I'm going to pull that out, get it refreshed, and then just stick it right back under. I will show you later how I refresh my raised beds, my pots, large grow bags. This probably won't happen until I get my warm season annuals out. Maybe May, maybe sometime in April, depending on the weather. But I am going to refresh this container today. And it's just like a rubber container from Home Depot. Works really well for staying outside over winter. So the first thing I'm going to do is just rake through the soil. This is already dirty because I've been using it, but rake through the soil. If there's any rocks or clumps of any root balls that are left in here, I will take those out. Now, obviously you want to wait to do this until after your soil is no longer frozen, because that's not really going to be very productive. But because the weather's been so nice and I'm moving plants out, honestly, this is probably a month earlier than I expected to be doing this, but here we are. And I do know that I'm sure we'll get some more weather that's a little bit colder. Hopefully nothing that's going to completely damage the plants. So it seems like in here we're looking pretty good. So I'm kind of going back and forth. I think what I'm going to add in first is the perlite, because that's going to be easier to mix around before this is completely full. So I'm going to add in that perlite in here. Again, that's to improve the drainage, especially in my garden where I have a lot of issues with root rot. I add it here. I will add it in my raised beds as well. And then we will get the compost added in. So I've grabbed my perlite. Now I would say if I was, let's say, filling up a container this large, starting with an empty container, I wouldn't put all the soil in and then try to add perlite. I would do layer of potting soil, layer of perlite, layer of compost mix, and then continue kind of like lasagna, just because it's easier to mix a little bit at a time and then add more. But my goal really is to mix the perlite all the way through. Now, since I'm not planting directly in this container, I can, let's say I get to the bottom and there's less perlite, I can then just add perlite directly to the container that I'm planting in. With my raised beds, though, I really want to make sure I get down at the bottom, because that's where the most clay-like potting soil is, because the particles are so small and have broken down over time. But in here, I'm just going to try to get as much as I can in here mixed as deep down as possible. I probably have about 6 inches from the top with all of the pots that I emptied out. So let's just go ahead and dump and mix. Try not to spill too much while you're doing it. And then again, just raking in here. Now, because there's kind of that like white powder that comes out, I don't know if I should be wearing a mask while I do this. I'm not really one for safety, even though I should probably be more so in the garden. So keep that in mind at least. So I'm just mixing this in. Now, kind of what I've come across as the recommended ratio is 1 to 4. So like 1 part perlite to 4 parts potting soil. But it's really going to depend on the plant. It'll also depend on how much perlite you have. For me, I'd rather start with less perlite because it's always easier to add than take some out. I don't even really know how you'd take some out. But that way, if I do have either a plant that wants better draining soil or it's a container where I know that the drainage isn't as good as other containers, then I can just, again, add perlite specifically at that time to that container. I'm going to stand up so I can get better leverage to scoop all the way as far down to the bottom as I can. And I'm just going back and forth. Again, if this was empty, I would have done layers of this, but trying to get as far down to the bottom as I can here. The compost I'm using is Blue Ribbon Organics compost. I've never been tied to a particular compost. I will take whatever I can find at the garden center or Home Depot. I've used like chicken manure, mushroom compost. I believe this one, it said, was made from food waste. So any compost seems to work well for me. Obviously, there's going to be a few different balance of nutrients based on the compost that you're using, but for me, I'm not really tied to anything in particular. Now, I do also have a tumbler composter on the back deck. It's so small, again, issues with small space, that whatever I make in there doesn't leave that deck. In fact, it usually just fills like a couple of my raised beds back there, and that's it. But something I want to look into is some sort of composting system, maybe not a tumbler composter, but something I can like slide underneath, like for example, this raised bed, the raised bed behind me. That way it's not taking up space I would be using for plants, but I have more space to compost. So let me know if there's a system for that you would recommend, something that's relatively, I mean, maybe I have about 18 inches to 2 feet of available height underneath there. I can get away with a little bit more width. So let me know if you have any ideas. So let's get the compost added in, and that's the last step that I'm going to do, at least for now, in this bin. So that's everything I'm doing so far to refresh. As far as like balance of compost, again, I've seen different things like 1 to 1, 1 to 3. I just added in however much would fit, so that's where I'm at. And again, when I'm planting up something, I can add in more compost if I want to. I also like to top dress with compost. So now let's go ahead and we'll use what I just made and plant up one of my hydrangeas. The hydrangea I'm going to plant up today is Let's Dance Skyview. The reason I'm planting these up is because I have a feeling they are pretty root bound in here, and I want to be able to give them enough water as they're starting to grow. This was overwintered in the garage in the nursery pot. Now it's ready for its own pot. So let's take that out. Now, as far as the container, this is like, I'd say medium for my garden, maybe probably small in a lot of people's gardens. So it will dry out much faster than a larger container. So again, with the level of perlite in here, the current level of drainage, I think we're pretty good. So I'm going to put that in there. And a good thing about containers, let's say I realize this does need more drainage, I can always pop the hydrangea out, put more perlite in, replant the hydrangea. Not that you want to be, moving your plants around that much, but if you make a mistake, you can go in and fix it pretty easily in a container garden. Let's get you out of your pot. Yeah, that looks very root bound and ready for a repot. So I'm just going to break up some of these roots here with my fingers. And then I want to get this planted so that there's an inch at the top. So I need to take out some of the soil because I filled it up too much. Let's see if that height works better. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. There we go. This is exciting. Again, I still can't believe I'm doing this this early into March, but Mother Nature is the one dictating my garden schedule. As much as I like to think I'm in charge, I'm not. All right, the hydrangea's all planted up. Now, normally at this time, I would water, but when the water's not on yet, I could still fill up a watering can inside. But we are supposed to get rain tomorrow. So, assuming we do, I'm just gonna leave this outside to get rained on. If we don't, then I will go ahead and water this myself. But that's all I do to refresh the potting soil. You know what, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have added some biotone into here. Maybe I'll sprinkle some in a little bit just on the top and rake it in. But don't think that like this is all that you can add in. You can add in whatever else you want once you plant it up. So you can go ahead and mix in anything else that you want for your plants, because different plants are probably going to need different things as well. But yeah, that's everything that I do for this. So I guess I'll cover it back up and we'll get it moved back under there. I'll just pull it out as needed. Something I do also need, because this hydrangea goes on the back deck. Luckily it's small enough to move over here, but I'm probably going to need another tub for the back deck. That way I can easily just fill up on the front deck with this one, fill up on the back deck with another one. But right now I only have one because I didn't really have that much to empty on the back deck. All right, and we're done. So it's as simple as that. Let me know if there is anything else that you add to your potting soil that's been used in the past. I'm always open to adding new things into my garden routine, but it really is that simple. And again, I've been doing this since 2020, and I've never had any issues with anything growing. Now I do apply liquid fertilizer throughout the season for my plants as well. And then I'll add in, like I said, other good things just kind of as I feel like it, but that's pretty much it. The number one question I feel like I get asked in my garden is, do you replace the soil every year? And no, I couldn't. I couldn't garden. That would be way too much work to garden if I had to do that, because I'd have to probably hire somebody to take the soil away and then carrying up all of those bags of soil, because you think a bag of soil goes far until you pour it into a pot and it's filled up half of the pot. So for all of my raised beds, all of my pots, that would just be way too much work. So luckily, this seems to work out pretty well. So like I said, let me know if you do reuse your soil. Any other tips that you have, let me know about potential composting that I can fit under my raised beds. And I will see you in the next video. Oh, and I will show you in a different video how to refresh my raised bed, but it's a pretty similar process. Bye.